Next curve.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Rethink podcast. And I'm Leonard Lee, Managing Director of Next Curve. And today I have, once again, one of my favorite guests, Debbie Reynolds, the digital diva, right?
Yeah, Data Diva.
Yes, absolutely. Of Debbie Reynolds Consulting, LLC. We are going to be talking about the global crisis in trust and privacy that is grappling the world and threatening to reshape our tech policy into something that may not exactly be what we want.
Right.
And so, we're being dramatic here because I think there's a huge concern that Debbie and I both share. That's how we do. We're just dramatic. And It's great to have you again, Debbie. It's been far too long. In fact, I wanted to have you on much earlier as some of these big headlines of 2021, as well as some of the stuff that was happening at the tail end of 2020 started to emerge. But I have you on now.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have some fun, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
In this installment, we will be talking about the challenges that we face in keeping our regulatory policies and measures up to date and effective to keep individuals safe, economies, nations, and society safe from a growing number of digital threats that are forming around the frontier of our digital present and future. And before we get into our discussion, Debbie, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience and give us an update on some of the things that you're up to and working on?
Sure. So as Leonard said, I'm Debbie Reynolds. I'm the founder, CEO, and Chief Data Privacy Officer of Debbie Reynolds Consulting. I like to say that I work at the intersection of technology, law, and privacy. So I work a lot with companies that have multinational concerns or interests, trying to help companies with things like barriers to adoption, being able to expand or pivot, being able to operationalize data privacy within their organizations. And I work a lot with companies in emerging technologies like frameworks and things in terms of how people build and do privacy by design. So one of the really interesting things I'm working on, I'm not even sure if I talked to you about this last time, but I'm working on a project currently with an organization, XRSI, which is creating a data privacy framework for developers of things like virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality stuff around the world. So it's pretty cool. Again, as people from around the world, we're focused on healthcare applications and education. But then the project will continue to evolve as privacy laws evolve. And so, especially with things like 5G and Internet of Things and kind of the mapping of the world and what I call four dimensions, all that will play into to that XR framework. So that's a really exciting thing. I lead the compliance part of that program.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Let's set the agenda for our discussion for our audience. And we will be talking about the following. Number one, the SolarWind hack. How could have happened? Then we will talk about Clubhouse, scaling on top of your contact list. So I think I'm going to be triggering Debbie with this one because, she's sensitive about privacy, right? Yeah.
That's right.
And then this is Debbie's favorite topic, Apple's privacy first versus Facebook's advertiser first doctrine.
Yes.
Right. That one's going to be a good one. All of these are good, I think.
These are all good, yeah.
Great. Yeah. And then finally, we will talk about antitrust and privacy and why we are dazed and confused. And specifically, we'll talk about this war on big tech as we see it being played out in Congress and frankly across the world. So with that, why don't we get started with our first topic here, which is the SolarWind hack, which came into the headlines in mid-December, right? I think it came as a shock to everyone.
Yeah.
That there was this massive hack that had been going on for months and months through the course of 2020, being instituted by the Russian intelligence agencies. So, you know, I don't know. What was your initial reaction when you heard about this?
I was really shocked about this. So it was so sophisticated, and it's not something that people were sort of thinking about. Talk about a Trojan horse, right? So
Yeah.
I think, especially, when we think about terms like zero trust, a lot of people are thinking about, individuals within an organization or individuals that are trying to get in a certain way. So I think a lot of people weren't, with certain applications and the way they share data, the way things are connected. I don't think anyone was thinking zero trust in terms of a application like that. And then two, I think, SolarWinds is sort of, the world is now, it's like before SolarWinds and after SolarWinds. So now that we know what we know, I think things have to change a lot about cybersecurity and how people do it. So zero trust should really be zero trust. So, you need to look at all applications, all people, to make sure you're looking at things that way. But then also it has to change about the way people define breaches and the way that they think of it. So when you think of a breach, they think, somebody's in the hoodie in the basement and they take something, they're going to use it right away. Where a lot of times what was happening with the SolarWinds thing, once the person got in, they gave themselves administrative rights, which means that they could sort of move around and do whatever they wanted. And sometimes what they wanted to do was just watch. Mm-hmm. So they didn't really take anything right then, but they were sort of surveilling, everything and deciding what they wanted to do. So, I think one important thing to talk about with SolarWinds, people are focused on SolarWinds, but I'm sure there are many other apps probably that had those vulnerabilities that we don't even know about yet, that we're not talking about right now. And then I think a lot of people who don't understand the severity of it, like people think, I don't have SolarWinds, so this didn't impact me. So it doesn't mean that.
Right.
It doesn't mean just because you don't have SolarWinds, it doesn't mean that you were not attacked. And because you have SolarWinds, that doesn't mean that you were attacked. So
well, it doesn't mean that your data wasn't compromised, because some of these institutions that got hacked, which include like Microsoft and some actual pretty big names out there. Oh, Lord knows they have your data in one form or another, right? Whether it's personal or it's commercial. And speaking of zero trust, it's interesting that you bring that up, because most of the times when we think about zero trust, it's about the network, right? And how you construct a network, how you manage the network, how you set the policies up for the network, right? But the ironic thing here, is that, well, SolarWind is a network monitoring and service management company, right? I mean, they literally provide the tools for enterprises to monitor anomalies and events and conditions in their network. And where zero trust may not have applied and failed was in their SDLC and the management of their software. I mean, quite literally, that was what got compromised, and how the hackers were able to insert the malware into the updates of the tools that enterprises use to monitor and harden their networks, their enterprise networks. And that's scary on a different level, right?
Yes.
But it's also a really sober reminder to, I think, the industry, early on in 2020, as well as I would say about 2 years ago, and I'm going back to that whole Supermicro, the spy chip thing, and this whole fear about Chinese companies and the supply chain, and there being these little spying chips were engineered into the boards of computers, servers that are used by Amazon and Apple and the like, right? But ironically, those types of hacks are very, hacking through that hardware channel is very, very difficult. And lo and behold, an actual breach, catastrophic breach, happened at the software level, right? It was the software, it was the tools that we use, and it was done by Russia. And so it's almost like we were not paying attention to Russia enough. We didn't take that threat seriously. And even though there was attention to what they were doing, the campaigns that they were instituting in social media, in interference of our elections and stuff like that, we weren't taking the cyber hacking threat seriously enough, I think. And so, and I think that's evident in the eventuality that happened, which was this massive hack. And I think what they said, something like 18,000 SolarWind customers were compromised. And
I think, we have to change. We have to change. This is not working. A couple of things. So one is, some people treat cybersecurity like the fire department. So you don't think about it until your house is on fire, and then magically someone's supposed to jump into place. Definitely has to be more proactive. Definitely has to be zero trust, has to be really zero trust. But one of the things that I think that needs to happen, that is happening in these other places that are very skilled at hacking and stuff like that, is that there needs to be more collaboration and communication between government and private sector. So I feel like everyone's sort of doing their own thing and maybe not sharing enough of the intel or sharing enough of the knowledge and stuff that they learned.
Right.
Especially some companies want to hide that they've been hacked. So I'm not saying that you shout it from every mountaintop that you've been hacked, right? But obviously there are some regulatory requirements if you've had a hack. But some companies, more companies need to share their story in a way to help other people. And right now, I don't think there's an incentive to do that. And then there's also, if you get hacked, even if you call the FBI, that's really not their problem. It's sort of your problem. It's not like they're going to, it's not like TV where they're going to swoop in and do something. So I think there has to be more of a collaboration and more of an understanding that sort of the divided way that we're thinking about cyber makes us vulnerable. Even if we have smart people, we aren't working together, or we're not doing it in a systematic fashion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there definitely needs to be more coordination, especially as you're looking at these state actors, these less than savory state actors that are coordinating, initiating, organizing these very deleterious attacks, right? And in this case, it was not only targeting commercial targets, also government, and who knows about the personal. I'm sure there's personal in there somewhere. Right. But it boils down to, it's not, can we trust our hardware? Can we trust our software?
Right.
And
who are we up to the task? So let's say, let's say a company has someone on their, cyber team. Maybe they're just kind of a part-time person or whatever. Yeah. I'm not saying that you have to have an army of people, but basically you have someone who may not cover all your needs, but then how can you expect that person to handle espionage? So you're asking way too much. So we don't have the right things in place. We're not thinking about it in a systematic fashion and sort of doing it on an ad hoc basis from company to company. It's just, that creates a vulnerability in and of itself because there isn't enough strategy and there isn't enough skin in the game for everybody to share, this information.
Right. Yeah. But it's a big to-do.
It's a huge to-do.
Yeah. Giant
It's a huge to-do. Well, and then to me, cyber, we're dealing with states that teach people cyber almost from birth. Okay. So it's a very concerted effort to get that type of education in as many people as possible, where I feel like we don't have as much emphasis on that education. Like people are trying to find out how to get into different things cybersecurity, and it's hard because it's such a huge set of domains, and we need more people. There are so many cyber openings for stuff, and I feel like we're mismatched in that way because we're not really training people to do those jobs. We're just hoping magically someone's going to fall out the sky and have all these, credentials and one thing I saw recently, they asked someone for 10 years of experience for a tool that's only been out for 5 years. And stuff
yeah. That's classic. Well, you know what? There is hope, though. Today's 13-year-olds and, teenagers, I think they've developed some pretty good chops in cyber, trying to hack into their parents' laptops and iPads to play Roblox. So there is hope.
Yes, I agree.
So, hey, let's move on to our next topic here, which is Clubhouse. And for those of you who don't know what Clubhouse is, it's a new social platform that is being incubated by Andreessen Horowitz. So for those of you who recall Mark Andreessen, he famously invented the internet. I'm just kidding. Sort of the browser Netscape way back in the day, the early .com era. And so this Clubhouse platform, I think it was released sometime in the middle of August, sometime of last year, has all of a sudden become all the rage, right? And I'll have to admit that I'm a member of Clubhouse. I was invited in and I checked it out. And we see it's still in sort of this beta phase, right? But it's accumulating millions of users. And one of the ways that they're doing that is taking your contact list and very obviously, mapping relationships within their network. So I assume here that I'm going to trigger you with this because the contacts in your contact lists. Let me ask you this, Debbie. Whose privacy, whose personal data is that?
That's a good question. It should belong to the person, but right. If the person gave it to you, then it's not private, right?
No.
So this is almost sort of a thing like Cambridge Analytica or Facebook or friends of friends. So advertisers can access you, and then they can also access your network. So this is kind of very much the same. And I think there are other apps that ask for your contact list too. I think WhatsApp does it. You can tell them no, right? It'll ask you. I have other apps that say, "Oh, can I look at your contact list?" I always say no because it's like, why do you need my contact list? You know what I'm saying? So I actually someone asked me to join because they want me to speak on something on Clubhouse or whatever. So I'm not yet gone on yet, but we'll see. But when I signed up, it asked me several times about my contact list, and I was like, no. So I think you just have to keep saying no to them. But I think the thing people are, privacy folks that I know get sort of outraged about these new apps that come up. But these new apps are doing the same thing that the old apps are doing. So Facebook does this, and most people have Facebook. So we're not up in uproar about that. One thing I told someone on the internet today when they were talking about Clubhouse or whatever, I'm like, if you connect your phone to your car via Bluetooth, they download your contact list, and you can't stop them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it updates your contact list every time that you go. So, and that data gets transmitted wirelessly someplace that you don't even know. So, if you're going to be upset about Clubhouse, you need to be upset about that.
Yeah, but aren't we starting to get upset? I think this goes back. Yeah, but I think this goes back to what we talked about in our last podcast together. I don't know if it was yours or ours.
Mm-hmm.
But these companies do what they do because they know they can, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right if we really understood what they were doing. Right. So here's my take on it, and I just want to get your reaction.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it is our personal data if it's in our contact list. It's actually someone else's. So the whole act of asking for someone's contact list, if it's not for some discrete purposes within that application that is private to you and your relationships with the folks who are in your contact list, that should not be allowed, because you are basically being asked, can you share other people's personal data? So they don't have the option of opting out. And so that's kind of what I was thinking as I was looking at what these guys were doing. And I totally recognize this is how Facebook and every single other social platform out there or network has basically scaled their business.
Right.
But I think the question is this practice fundamentally a good thing? And would it be a violation of GDPR?
It probably would be, I would say, a violation of GDPR. But, I think this app and other apps, they sort of dance around the privacy rules because they can, especially in the US, there are a lot of gray areas or empty areas. I can't even call them loopholes. We don't even have holes, so it can't have loops or something that doesn't have holes, right? So it's just
we don't have anything there to have holes for. That's what I learned from you. Mm-hmm. That is literally what I learned from you.
Yeah, it's just totally wild.
There's nothing there. Yeah. It's just, there's nothing.
There's very little there. So the whole friends are friends. You're, in the U.S. especially. So because privacy isn't a fundamental human right, when you sort of give data away, it's sort of out there. So you can't reclaim it in the same way, or it's not the same as they think of it in Europe, where they're more circumspect, I think, about what they share. They generate less data, where we just didn't generate tons of data. We're happy to sign on to these things. But, my thing is, how is Clubhouse any different than these other things? So if we're outraged about that, we need to be outraged about Facebook. We need to be outraged about telematics in our car. We need to be outraged about, you may have a flashlight app on your phone that you said, you can share my contacts for because it was free or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think the thing in the US is that regardless of what the company does, and I think it's important that it's free, right? So because it's free, the exchange, the value exchange is whatever they say it is. So, they probably couldn't ask your firstborn child, and it's illegal to sell your organs in exchange, but it's pretty much not, it's very little that you can't consent to. So if they're doing it for free, they can decide what that value exchange is. So the example I use is, you remember that app that came out a few years ago where you take a picture and it ages your face and makes you look older or something.
Oh, yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So it was a big uproar about that
Yeah.
because in exchange for doing this thing, they, in their terms of service, they were saying that if you take your picture on the app, that they own like the worldwide exclusive right to that image forever. So it's like, this is a game I played for like 10 minutes. And like, 10 years from now, it's my picture got to be on a billboard in Japan. So it's like, to me, it's like an uneven bargain. And it's sort of like, let's get them excited about this. Let's play on their psychological thing about missing out and wanting to sort of get in, and then let's delay the harm. So, we don't care about that, later. But I think for my mind is that people have to sort of go into it with their eyes open and they have to decide what they think is best. But the problem is it's not always apparent to individuals. So, I'm a crazy person that reads like privacy policies and stuff, and most people aren't going to do that. So I think to me, privacy policy shouldn't be more than like a page. It should be like 1,000 words or less,
Right.
So you should know at a glance exactly, what you're giving up, so that you can make an informed decision. But then there's another thing where these apps can change. So they can decide later that they want to add different features. They want to do different things. They want to do different things with your data than you thought they should be doing. This is probably goes back to kind of this WhatsApp thing with the privacy policy change, where people probably would not have signed up for WhatsApp if they had known that their data was going to go to Facebook. So there's a challenge there that's kind of a legal issue that hasn't yet been sorted out.
Right. And I think fundamentally, if people are to make educated, informed decisions, they need to be informed and knowledgeable. And as you've made it blatantly clear, there's even folks in our bubble, the tech bubble, who don't even get this stuff. And how do we expect the lay person or the person that's not in our bubble to even care, or be able to understand it in a way that we do, simply because we know the technology aspect of it and the scope and scale of the implications of these practices. We appreciate it just because we can see it, what's happening in the back end, literally. And I think a lot of times we take it for granted what we know.
That's true.
We just assume other people think the same way that we do, and it's not the case. And I think that's the big. I mean, there's knowledge gaps everywhere, but that's a big one that really gets in the way of the citizen really understanding what their privacy rights really are and what informed decisions would mean for them, and that they would probably not do a lot of the things that they do today if they really could understand.
Absolutely. Right. And they know that. So that's issue with their psychology there that's being manipulated as well. So
so I'm going to trick you again, but in a good way, because I know that you're a big fan of this Apple's privacy first stance, and then we've recently seen Tim Cook and Mark Zuckerberg go head to head on this whole topic of the privacy, the privacy controls that Apple's going to be instituting, and I think it's iOS 14.5. And it'll also apply to the Mac and iPad OS, pretty much everything across Apple's portfolio. And then you have Mark Zuckerberg's reaction to it, the Facebook reaction to that, which is, Apple's actions are going to undermine small businesses. I guess is really what their argument is. But it's really advertising. Let's call it for what it is.
It's supposed to be a war, do war in air quotes, right? Between Facebook and Apple over this.
Yeah, but you have a point of view on this, right?
I do. So I'll do the short answer. The short answer is Apple owns the OS on which Facebook runs. The end. That's it. There is no war.
That's
you can't
it?
have a war
Yeah.
with the company that owns the OS that your thing runs on. That's it. There is no war unless you have your own OS. So,
well, yeah, you're right. And so, you know what? I think that you literally took that agenda item, that discussion item out. Nothing else to talk about. You're absolutely right. So guess what we're going to do?
What?
We're just going to go on to the next topic, right? Which is antitrust and privacy. Because this whole thing, this scuffle between Apple and Facebook, it really is about that. Because you know what is Facebook claiming is that Apple is basically exhibiting anti-competitive behavior, right? They're saying, well, they're advertising on their platform. How come they're cutting off our what do you call it? How come they're tipping over our gravy train? You know, because iOS is their number one platform. They make the most money off of Apple.
That's right. You know, that's right. And then there is no future. There is no future in the universe for any company that thinks going forward that they can't be transparent. So companies that think that they cannot be transparent about a user's data and what they're doing, they're not going to make it. So the sooner that companies get on the bandwagon with this transparency thing, the better. So if you're trying to be more opaque about the stuff, you're swimming upstream, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Well, in what way is Facebook or Apple being opaque and non-transparent?
Well, Apple is being transparent, and that's what I really like about them, where they're trying to show people, I get those notifications too, where they say, oh, you're sharing with this, this app is recording you, or you're sharing with this many trackers, or we block this many trackers. Just to know that and to be able to make a decision in the moment while you're working on something is very important.
Right.
But I think what Apple is doing by bringing transparency is letting people make that choice and sort of make a consideration at that point. So where these other apps to sell data, they want you to give them as much information as possible, and they don't want you to opt out. They don't want you to say no. So they don't like the fact that this OS is sort of giving people those opt-outs or making it so that they have to opt in as opposed to opt out. So America's very opt-out place where they take all your stuff and then you have to do all these little gymnastics to get out of stuff, where Apple is like, okay, I'm going to make it opt in, which makes it puts the onus on the company that's trying to get the data to try to do it in a way that a person will feel comfortable with it. And they're not going to be like, oh, we're not going to tell you anything, but we want your data, Right. That's like if you put your money in the bank and then you say, okay, I want to know my balance. And they're like, well, we're not going to tell you. You're like, what? So I think thinking about it in that way will help people understand why transparency is really important with data.
Yeah. And, I might get both of us kicked off of Clubhouse for stating this, but Apple should maybe look into this whole opt-in for sharing your contact information.
Yeah. I think it's a choice though.
It is a choice.
But they ask you a lot. So they ask you like 5 times.
But they also, like what they're going to be doing with the new privacy feature, they also have an underlying policy for what is just generally acceptable on their platform, right?
Right. That's true.
So
that's true.
I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. Yeah. I'm sure Mark Andreessen would be really pissed off to hear what he just heard come out of my mouth, but
well, it still goes back to choice, right?
Yeah.
So people can choose, and a lot of people say people are fine with that. They want to, sort of share that or whatever, but it's sort of incumbent upon the person to sort of make that choice. But basically, I think the thing that people are upset about is that certain features you can't use unless you say yes. But that's very similar to Instagram. That's similar to Facebook. I mean, I don't think that's different. So I'm like, we have to be outraged about these other things as well. I think I'm more upset about the car feature than Clubhouse.
Really?
So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, because I don't get to choose. It doesn't let me choose whether it takes my contact list or not. It just takes it.
Yeah, see, I didn't even know that. So I'm getting educated. Thank you. Wow. Okay. Makes me make me think twice about buying a connected intelligent car.
Yeah, even though that's one of my
even
favorite.
Though I already have one. Too late.
Well, one thing that I do on certain things that I use, I don't populate contact lists.
Yeah, so, I don't either. Yeah.
Like on email, I keep my contacts different, so I don't populate them in a list.
So let's take our discussion around antitrust and privacy one level higher, because one of the things, as we've been watching these congressional proceedings with the quote unquote big tech companies, which I think is a complete misnomer and misconception, it seems that there is this constant confusion and conflation of the topic of antitrust, privacy, and dare I throw in freedom of speech and media expression. Wow, what do you think? I mean,
it's a mess. It's not. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. I say it's like trying to cut a rock with a butter knife. I mean, I don't know what it is exactly people think they're trying to do with this. It's, I don't know. I feel like maybe this, antitrust is probably the biggest bat that the U.S. has to swing at tech companies. So that's what they're using, but I don't think it's going to be effective in the privacy sense because it's not really answering the question. So
exactly,
you're generating a lot of money for law firms that are representing these companies, but I don't think it's going to help the consumer. So, an example I give is, first of all, these antitrust laws are very old, so they weren't really built for the era of what we're dealing with. And then they're thinking about things in terms of finite resources, where data is an infinite resource and it can be renewed. And, the innovation that happens, you create things out of thin air. It was never contemplated that way. So, like, I'll give you an example. So let's say traditional antitrust, you have, let's say there were 100 oil fields in the U.S. and one person owned it, and they said, well, let's bust this company up and we're going to divide these oil fields amongst these other companies. And then, we're going to have more competition and, people have more choice or whatever. But when you try to, break up Facebook, break it up into what? So are you going to take off, it's like, let's say your car. So let's say Facebook is a car. So let's say the antitrust says, we're going to take your steering wheel away and we're going to give it to another company. And then you're going to have to buy the steering wheel from another company so that you can use it with this. That makes no sense. And then, again, data is an infinite, infinite resource, renewable resources, being created. So if you're breaking up a company in that way, it doesn't make sense because you're breaking up into what? You want 5 Facebooks? I mean, that makes no sense. And then 2, they say over the last few years, the FCC has approved, over 500 acquisitions for these companies. And now they're sort of rethinking some of those things with big tech. But, when you're, I'll give you an example. So Amazon bought Whole Foods, and nobody blinked about that. Yeah. Why? Because Amazon's an online retailer and Whole Foods is a grocery store. But the thing they weren't looking at is now you have a company that has access to these two pools of data that's very different that they combine and do different things with. So the monopoly, in my view, is a data monopoly. So they're collecting so many different types of data, but traditional antitrust on its face, maybe like let's say if Amazon tried to buy another company that was like them, like an online retailer, they may have said, "Oh, well, let's put the brakes on it." But in my view, the issue is the data combination, not the fact that they're doing in different industries. So any of these big tech companies, they have so much power and money, they can pivot into any industry they want, but it doesn't register somehow for people that this may be an antitrust issue.
Yeah, and you know, from my perspective, the way I look at it is you know, Congress is completely getting privacy and antitrust wrong. So this argument that they have against Facebook and Google, separate room, please.
Yeah,
it has no place in the antitrust discussion. The fact that they're large, that they have market share, some of them have arguably a antitrust issue. Just don't conflate that with privacy and freedom of speech and all this other stuff.
right.
It just has no bearing there.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Right. And then what is your remedy exactly?
Right. And then here's the other thing that I think is really funny. Everyone says that Amazon is like anti-competitive and Apple's anti-competitive, and that they are monopolies. And if you really understood these companies and you look at the market share that they have, they're far from. I mean, if you look at Amazon, their overall revenues are still, I think, around half of Walmart's.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. If you actually do a study on retail market share, Amazon's market share, global market share retail is actually really small.
Yeah.
So there's no way that they have a global monopoly or even a monopoly in the United States. So Jeff Bezos, you may leave the room.
Right.
Same goes with Apple. But both of them have marketplaces, but that's their marketplace. They've developed it. And participants have the option of not participating in that marketplace. That's why you have Shopify and all these other alternatives. And I think a lot of this designation of them being big tech is all based on valuation. It has nothing to do with the nature of the company. That's just how Wall Street has inflated their valuation to these astronomical levels. That doesn't mean that they're a monopoly.
Right. And then people get to choose. You choose an iPhone. You choose to use Amazon. You don't have to. It's not like Amazon, owns the waterworks where you have to, to get water out of your faucet, you have to give them money or something. So it's not like they're offering a resource that's not vital in the same way. And it's an infinite resource. So they can continue to innovate and create new things or whatever. But just because they've done it well and get paid for it doesn't mean that they're a monopoly or they're a company that has to be busted up. Busted up into what exactly? I don't know. Yeah.
And you're making a great point, because that's one of the things that I think is really curious about this, Competition and Anti-Law Enforcement Reform Act that Senator, is she a senator? Yeah, Senator Klobuchar is like advocating. She's putting it together. You mentioned that the Sherman Act, which is the Antitrust Act, is antiquated.
Very much.
Yeah, maybe, but I think some of the principles are still pretty sound. What I think has happened here is that our lawmakers and our policymakers and our regulators have fundamentally not understood these companies as they've evolved. I know for a fact, just because I was working in the .com industry, at the very beginning, I know that people didn't know what these companies were. They called them all kinds of weird things that they weren't, and they still call them all kinds of weird things that they aren't. Like, for instance, Apple, until recently, they called them a hardware company.
Right.
They have not been a hardware company for a very long time. It's just that That's how Wall Street categorized them. And then that's how Congress perceives them. That's how the media portrays them. And then there's these incremental aha moments, but they've already acted on various acquisitions, M&A activities, and their understanding of these companies have lagged. The decisions that have already been made. So now that's why they're, FTC and is looking at maybe splitting up Facebook.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe telling them to get rid of, spin off Instagram, and because now they have buyer's remorse. They're going, oh, we didn't know at that time that these could become antitrust issues because we didn't understand the business.
Well, then, you have to go back in a time machine, right? So when they bought, I think Facebook bought Instagram for like $1 billion. And they didn't know that it was going to blow up like it did and, be as popular as it is. Obviously they were hoping for that. They paid $19 billion for WhatsApp, and they, obviously their changes in the way that they're going to do their advertising with that stuff is based on the fact they want to make some money from WhatsApp. That's, to me, there was no other avenue, or, this is always going to happen. So from the moment that they bought WhatsApp, the purpose was going to be to make money off of that. So that should not have been a surprise to anybody. But I think, I'm concerned greatly that, part of the reason why a lot of these tech companies have prospered so well is because there hasn't been enough regulation. Now, I'm not a person who thinks that regulation is the answer to everything by no means, but, they prospered in the US in a way that they could not prosper in like the EU. So like Amazon, Apple, whatever, those companies could not be what they are. They were started like in the EU or other countries. They have the same regulations. So that has, and the fact that lawmakers don't understand the companies help them grow to where they are. So that the flip side of that sword is now, because Congress doesn't understand what they are, they're going to try to create regulations that are not going to make sense, right? So that is a downside. So that is against what they want now. So it's
but I would only say that they're still trying to figure out what these guys are. Because as soon as you call them big tech companies, that's a red flag for me. That means you don't know what these companies are. Number one, I mean, what the hell is a big tech company? Is it because their market value, valuation, or is it revenue? Is it market share? What is it? Why are they big tech, and why do you have them in the friggin' room? Talking about all kinds of weird, goofy things that, And so, to your point, I think it's absolutely the point that we need to have relevant, effective regulations. Maybe not more, but the right ones. And my fear is that we have policymakers and lawmakers and just industry as well as consumers that just don't get any of this stuff. And that's just going to lend toward bad policy. But, obviously it's going to cause issues because, like you said, the EU, they look at privacy in a very different way. They look at antitrust and sort of, there's some relative consistency, but there's going to be some nuances that rub, trade partners the wrong way, and I think you made a great point. And, you mentioned this in our last outing here, that these companies are what they are because they have done what they legally are able to do in the United States. And we fundamentally don't have privacy rights. And that's why they get away with what they do.
That's correct. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, oh my God. I don't know if I should say that on a professional podcast like this one, because I know like CEOs are going to be watching this, and I just said, oh my God. But that's all the time that you and I have.
Okay.
Debbie,
no problem.
Thank you so much once again for joining me. And why don't you do this? Take a moment and share with our audience how they can get in contact with you and tap into all the wonderful knowledge that you have on these very important topics.
Sure. So people can always go to my website, debbiereynoldsconsulting.com. I have a lot of videos that I put out. I put out a video every week, actually, on a particular privacy or tech or legal topic. I have a podcast as well. You can link to that on my website. It has transcripts and the audio of that. And Leonard was nice enough to actually be one of my first guests. I was really excited. So if you listen to this one, you definitely need to listen to that one as well.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'm on LinkedIn as well. So people can connect with me. I'm happy to accept a connection request with anyone who's in Leonard's audience, because you guys are smart.
Awesome. Well, Debbie, thanks again for joining us. And to our listeners and viewers, thanks for joining us. Please subscribe to our YouTube and Apple Podcast channels and visit us at www.next-curve.com. And until next time, be safe and stay healthy. Thanks.
Thank you.
Visit us at www.next-curve.com.